December 2, 1984. Bhopal, the city of lakes in central India. Like any other night, a calm, chilly winter evening had set in silently over the city. Thousands of ordinary people, from young children to the elderly, had gone to sleep peacefully after a long day's work. None of them knew that within that silent darkness, death was closing in on them. There was no war, no sound of exploding bombs, no tremor of an earthquake. Yet within a few short hours, this beautiful city was about to be transformed into a vast cremation ground. Bhopal was standing on the precipice of the most catastrophic industrial disaster in human history. This is not merely a story of a mechanical failure or an accidental tragedy. It is a blood-stained history of boundless corporate negligence, unbridled greed, and absolute indifference towards human life. The story does not begin on that cursed night of 1984. Its seeds were sown many years prior, in the mid-1960s. At that time, India was undergoing the Green Revolution. To feed millions of hungry citizens, a revolutionary shift was taking place in agriculture. High crop yields required vast amounts of pesticides. It was precisely then that a giant American chemical corporation entered the Indian market, Union Carbide. They brought a lucrative proposal to the Indian government. They wanted to build a world-class pesticide plant in India that would provide farmers with affordable, high-quality pesticides while creating thousands of local jobs. In 1969, Union Carbide India Limited chose the heart of Madhya Pradesh, the city of Bhopal, for its pesticide factory. The location was exceptionally strategic, boasting excellent railway connectivity to quickly transport goods across the country. Initially, the plant only formulated and packaged pesticides, but by the late 1970s, factory management decided to stop importing raw materials and instead manufacture an extremely hazardous and volatile chemical directly inside the plant, methyl isocyanate, commonly known as MIC. This MIC gas was used to produce a famous pesticide named 7. But how dangerous MIC truly was lay far beyond the imagination of the general public. Chemists knew all too well that it was an extremely unstable and violently toxic liquid. If it came into contact with even a trace amount of water, it would trigger a violent exothermic reaction, generating immense volumes of toxic gas while causing temperatures and pressure to spike uncontrollably. Because of this, keeping this chemical refrigerated near 0 degrees Celsius was mandatory. At the heart of the factory, thousands of liters of this poison were stored in 3 massive underground stainless steel tanks, tanks 611, 612, and 610. When Union Carbide built the factory, assurances were given that safety measures would be of the highest standard. Yet the placement of the factory itself was a monumental error. Right against the factory walls lay densely populated slums like Jaya Prakash Nagar and Kazi Camp. Thousands of working-class families lived just a few hundred meters from the chemical complex. They had no idea that every night they were sleeping next to a ticking volcano that could erupt at any moment.
By the early 1980s, the global demand for pesticides began to plummet. Sales of 7 crashed, and the Bhopal plant began suffering severe financial losses. To maintain profit margins and cut losses, Union Carbide management began making a series of catastrophic decisions. In the name of cost-cutting, they gutted the plant's core safety systems. Experienced and trained engineers and technicians were laid off or transferred to other departments. Tasks that previously required a dozen workers were left to just 2 or 3. Employee training was slashed, and even basic protective equipment supplies were halted. But nature is unforgiving. Dark clouds had been gathering long before the ultimate catastrophe. Well before the disaster, multiple warning signs appeared, all of which were blatantly ignored by top plant management. In 1978, a major fire broke out at the plant. In December 1981, a maintenance worker named Mohammed Ashraf was exposed to toxic MIC gas while repairing a pipe and died a painful death. Yet, management hushed up the incident as an isolated accident. Just a few months later, in early 1982, another gas leak occurred, leaving several workers severely ill. Raj Kumar Keswani, a brave local journalist and worker union ally, foresaw the impending danger early on. He published a series of investigative reports in a local newspaper. His headlines were spine-chilling. Bhopal sitting on the brink of a volcano, and if you do not read this, you might not live tomorrow. But the desperate cries of a single journalist fell on deaf ears. Neither the factory management nor the local administration paid attention. On the contrary, Union Carbide maintained that their plant was completely safe and posed no danger whatsoever. In fact, in 1982, a team of engineers sent from Union Carbide's U.S. headquarters inspected the Bhopal plant and compiled a secret report. That report explicitly documented at least 10 major safety hazards, including risks directly associated with the MIC tanks. They warned that a major chemical reaction could occur at any time due to human error or equipment failure. Yet, obsessed with cutting costs, corporate headquarters filed the report away in a drawer and let it gather dust.
By late 1984, the Bhopal factory had turned into a walking time bomb. Due to lack of maintenance, the plant's pipelines were rusted, valves were loose, and measuring instruments and pressure gauges were malfunctioning. To save money, the factory's refrigeration system, meant to keep the MIC gas chilled near 0 degrees, was completely shut off in June. Without cooling, the temperature inside the tanks began to climb steadily. As a final line of defense, the plant had 2 safety systems. First, a vent gas scrubber designed to neutralize leaking toxic gas using caustic soda. And second, a flare tower designed to burn off leaking gas high in the air. Yet by late November 1984, in an astonishing act of gross negligence, both safety systems had been shut down completely for repairs. Even the plant's emergency water curtain was poorly designed and could not reach the height of the escaping gas vents. December 2, 1984, a cold winter night. The sky was clear, but the air was heavy and still. At around 8 in the evening, workers on the night shift began their duties. On that night shift, tank 610 contained over 42 tons of deadly methyl isocyanate, far beyond its recommended safety limit. It was roughly 10:30 p.m. A worker began flushing a clogged pipeline with water, a routine maintenance process called pipe washing. According to protocol, a metal slip blind or diaphragm should have been installed to prevent water from backflowing into other pipes. Due to sheer carelessness, that blind was never installed. Water flowed through the pipe, bypassed a leaking, rusted valve, and poured straight into the cursed tank 610. The moment water mixed with the thousands of liters of toxic MIC inside the tank, an uncontrollable, violent chemical reaction was unleashed. At 11:30 p.m., operators in the control room noticed that the pressure inside tank 610 was spiking at an alarming rate. Within minutes, the gauge pegged past its maximum limit and broke. A sharp hissing sound began echoing from the tank, and the concrete casing above the underground vault began to crack and vibrate. Workers smelled a pungent, suffocating odor and felt their eyes burning violently. Yet assuming it was just a minor, routine leak, they brushed it off and took a tea break. By then, it was already too late. Deep underground, the temperature inside tank 610 had surged past 200 degrees Celsius. Under immense, unimaginable pressure, the tank's safety relief valve burst violently open. It was now the very beginning of December 3rd. In the pitch-black darkness of midnight, the doors of hell swung wide open over the quiet city of Bhopal. Tons upon tons of dense, white, deadly methyl isocyanate gas billowed continuously from the stack, floating into the night air. The cold, heavy winter breeze began dragging that lethal cloud downward toward the sleeping slums surrounding the plant, toward Jaya Prakash Nagar and Kazi Camp. Thousands of innocent people were fast asleep. They had no idea that the very air they were drawing into their lungs was no longer air. It had become pure, lethal poison. Silently, unnoticed, a white blanket of death was settling over an entire sleeping city. December 3, 1984, 12:30 a.m. The cold winter air over Bhopal did not carry the toxic gas away. Instead, because the air was heavy and still, it held the dense white cloud of methyl isocyanate close to the ground. Like a silent predator, it crept through the cracks of doors, windows, and mud walls of the neighboring slums, Jaya Prakash Nagar and Kazi Camp. Inside their homes, families were asleep, wrapped in blankets against the cold. They did not hear an explosion. They did not see the threat coming. The poison entered their lives not with a bang, but with a breath. The first sensation was a violent, unbearable burning. People woke up choking, their eyes feeling as if they had been splashed with acid. MIC pass reacts instantly with water, and inside the human body it attacked the wettest parts first: the eyes, the mouth, the throat, and the lungs. Within minutes, terror erupted across the city. Parents woke to the sound of their children screaming and gasping for air. People stumbled out of their homes into the pitch-black night, only to find the streets completely blanketed in a thick, suffocating cloud of white mist. Nobody knew what was happening. Was it a chemical attack? A fire? A bomb?
The natural instinct of a panicked human was to run. But running required taking deeper, faster breaths. And with every deep breath, people pulled more lethal poison into their lungs. The gas turned the fluid in their lungs into foam, causing victims to literally drown in their own bodily fluids. The scene on the streets of Bhopal was straight out of an apocalyptic nightmare. Thousands of people, blinded by the gas and screaming in agony, ran blindly through the dark, stepping over bodies that had already fallen. Whole families tried to flee together, but in the chaos and blinding smoke, children slipped from their parents' hands and were lost forever. Livestock, cows, buffaloes, dogs, collapsed and died in the streets, their bodies swelling rapidly. By 1 a.m., thousands of frantic residents were rushing toward the Hamidia Hospital, the main public medical facility in Bhopal. But the city's medical infrastructure was entirely unprepared for a catastrophe of this magnitude. Inside Hamidia Hospital, night shift doctors were suddenly overwhelmed by a human tide of suffering. Hundreds of victims were pouring through the doors every minute, clutching their eyes, vomiting blood, and collapsing on the floor. Within an hour, every bed, every corridor, and the entire hospital courtyard were packed with thousands of dying people. The doctors were desperate to save lives, but they faced a fatal obstacle. They had no idea what chemical had leaked, nor did they know the antidote. When frantic hospital authorities called the Union Carbide factory officials in the middle of the night to ask what gas had leaked and how to treat the victims, the factory management gave a shockingly evasive and deceptive response. They claimed that the gas was merely an advanced tear gas and that washing eyes with water was all that was needed. This lie proved fatal. Without proper information, doctors could only offer basic symptoms-based relief: eye drops, oxygen, and painkillers. They watched helplessly as infants and young children died in their arms by the hundreds. As the sun slowly rose over Bhopal on the morning of December 3rd, the full horrific extent of the tragedy was revealed to the world. The toxic cloud had cleared, but it left behind a landscape of absolute devastation. Streets were littered with thousands of corpses. Men, women, children, and animals lay side by side in the dust. The trees had turned black, their leaves withered by the chemical fumes. The air still carried a sickening, sweetish smell of boiled cabbage and decayed metal. Mass graves were dug hastily across the city. At the Hindu cremation grounds, hundreds of funeral pyres burned continuously day and night, filling the sky with thick black smoke. Wood for cremation ran out, forcing families to cremate multiple relatives on a single pyre. At the Muslim burial grounds, gravediggers worked until their hands bled, burying children in mass trenches because there were too many bodies and too little time. In the first 72 hours following the leak, an estimated 3,000 to 8,000 people lost their lives, though unofficial estimates suggest the immediate death toll was far higher. Over 500,000 people, more than half the city's population, were exposed to the deadly gas. As news of the disaster shocked the globe, international media descended on Bhopal. The world watched in horror as television screens showed images of mass graves, overflowing hospital wards, and blind, weeping survivors holding dead infants.
It was officially declared the worst industrial disaster in human history. Volunteers, local NGOs, and doctors from across India rushed to Bhopal to assist in relief efforts, but the scale of the crisis overwhelmed everyone. The Indian government was caught entirely off guard, lacking both the disaster management framework and the medical resources required to handle a mass chemical casualty event. Meanwhile, outrage was building across the country, directed squarely at the American multinational corporation responsible for the plant, Union Carbide. 4 days after the disaster, on December 7, 1984, the chairman and CEO of Union Carbide, Warren Anderson, flew into India from the United States. He claimed he was coming to inspect the site and offer humanitarian relief. However, as soon as his plane touched down in Bhopal, local police arrested him on charges of culpable homicide and corporate negligence. The arrest made global headlines. It seemed for a brief moment that the man at the top of the corporate hierarchy would be held accountable for thousands of lives destroyed in Bhopal. But what happened next stunned the world and sparked a decades-long controversy. Just hours after his arrest, Warren Anderson was granted bail. Under mysterious political pressure, he was escorted out of the police station, placed in a government vehicle, driven to the airport, and flown out of Bhopal on a state government aircraft to New Delhi. Days later, Anderson fled India for the United States, never to return again. How did the chief executive of a company responsible for thousands of deaths walk free within hours of his arrest? Who pulled the strings to facilitate his escape? And why did the justice system collapse so swiftly when confronting a powerful foreign corporation? The departure of Warren Anderson was not just the escape of a single executive. It was the opening chapter of a long, agonizing story of denied justice. As the toxic dust settled over Bhopal, the immediate horror of December 3rd morphed into a slow-motion catastrophe that would span decades. In the weeks and months following the leak, the Indian government established official commissions to investigate the root causes of the tragedy. What the investigations revealed was chilling. The disaster was not an unpredictable act of God, nor was it an unforeseen technological anomaly. It was the direct, inevitable result of systemic cost-cutting, defective plant design, disabled safety systems, and a complete disregard for human lives by Union Carbide management. Yet when faced with these undeniable facts, Union Carbide's legal team launched a ruthless corporate defense. Instead of taking responsibility, the corporation attempted to shift the blame onto its Indian workforce, fabricating a theory that a disgruntled local employee had intentionally sabotaged the plant. Independent investigations and safety experts thoroughly debunked the sabotage theory, but Union Carbide used every legal maneuver in the book to delay proceedings and evade accountability in Indian courts. The legal war for compensation became one of the most controversial battles in corporate history. The Indian government enacted the Bhopal Gas Leak Disaster Act, appointing itself as the sole legal representative of all victims to fight Union Carbide in the U.S. courts. Indian officials argued that a U.S. court should hear the case because American corporate headquarters dictated the plant's budget and safety policies. However, U.S. courts dismissed the case, sending it back to India under the argument that Indian courts were the appropriate venue. Fearing decades of endless litigation while victims starved and died without medical care, the Indian government made a shocking compromise. In February 1989, in an out-of-court settlement brokered by the Supreme Court of India, Union Carbide agreed to pay a lump sum of $470 million in full and final settlement of all past, present, and future claims. To the world, $470 million sounded like a massive sum, but when divided among the hundreds of thousands of registered victims, the reality was heartbreaking.
Most survivors received a meager compensation of roughly 25,000 to 50,000 rupees, barely $500, for a lifetime of debilitating health problems, lost livelihoods, and destroyed families. For many, it was not even enough to cover their ongoing medical bills. While lawyers argued over dollars and cents, the biological tragedy inside Bhopal's survivors continued to unfold. Methyl isocyanate had caused permanent, irreversible damage to those who breathed it. Generations of residents suffered from chronic respiratory diseases, early onset blindness, neurological disorders, severe depression, and cancers. Even more heartbreaking was the tragedy passed down through bloodlines. Women who survived the gas leak experienced extraordinarily high rates of miscarriages and stillbirths. Children born years after 1984 in the affected neighborhoods suffered from severe congenital defects, growth stunts, and immune deficiencies. To make matters worse, a second invisible disaster was lurking beneath the soil. When Union Carbide abandoned the factory site, they left behind hundreds of tons of toxic chemical waste dumped in open pits and unlined evaporation ponds. Over decades, monsoons washed these hazardous heavy metals and carcinogens deep into the groundwater table. Unaware of the hidden danger, local communities surrounding the factory drank, cooked, and bathed with water from local hand pumps for years. Environmental testing later revealed that the local drinking water contained levels of toxic chemicals and heavy metals hundreds of times higher than safe limits. The soil and water surrounding the abandoned plant remained a toxic legacy, continuing to poison new generations long after the gas leak was over. In 2001, the story took another turn when Dow Chemical Company purchased Union Carbide for billions of dollars. Dow Chemical steadfastly refused to accept any legal or environmental liability for the Bhopal site, maintaining that all liabilities were settled in the 1989 agreement. For the victims, it felt like fighting a hydra. As soon as one corporate entity vanished, another took its place, hiding behind legal walls while refusing to clean up the toxic waste still buried in Bhopal's soil. It was not until 2010, 26 years after the disaster, that an Indian court finally delivered a verdict in the criminal case against Union Carbide India Limited. 7 former Indian executives of the plant were convicted of negligence resulting in death. Their punishment? A sentence of just 2 years in prison and a fine of roughly $2,000 each. All 7 were immediately released on bail. Warren Anderson, declared a fugitive from justice by Indian courts, died comfortably in a Florida nursing home in 2014 at age 92, having never spent a single day in an Indian courtroom. The catastrophe at Bhopal shook the global industrial landscape to its core, forcing humanity to reevaluate the true cost of unregulated industrial progress. Out of the ashes of Bhopal, the world learned bitter, vital lessons. International environmental and industrial laws were rewritten. The concept of process safety management was strictly enforced worldwide. The disaster spurred the creation of right-to-know laws in the United States and across Europe, legally mandating that chemical companies inform local communities and emergency responders about hazardous materials stored in their neighborhoods. In India, the disaster led directly to the enactment of the Environment Protection Act of 1986,
creating strict regulatory frameworks for hazardous industries. The Bhopal Gas Disaster remains a monumental testament to the danger of putting corporate profits above human safety. It stands as an eternal warning that when regulatory oversight fails, when corporate greed goes unchecked, and when environmental warnings are ignored, the price is paid not in boardroom shares, but in human lives. Today, the abandoned water tower and rusted pipes of the Union Carbide factory still stand silently against the Bhopal skyline. The sirens have long gone quiet, but the fight of the survivors continues. Their resilience, their protests, and their refusal to be forgotten remain a powerful reminder to the world.